Three friends would take a sightseeing flight over the mountains, enjoy the last hours of a vacation, and be back in time for lunch. There was nothing in the scene to suggest danger. The sky over New Mexico was bright. The aircraft waited quietly on the ramp. For Tommy Robbins, the flight was meant to be a gift. His brother-in-law, Larry Diamond, had spent the week with him, and Tommy wanted to end the trip with something unforgettable. Larry was not a wilderness man. He was more comfortable in towns, in rooms, in places where roads led somewhere and help was never far away. But that morning, looking at the little Cessna, he was excited. From the air, the country would be vast and beautiful. It seemed like the perfect way to finish the vacation. Their pilot was Justin Kirkbride, Tommy's close friend. Justin knew the airplane. Tommy knew flying too. Both men understood mountain air better than most passengers ever would. This was not supposed to be risky. It was the kind of flight small plane pilots make all the time, a loop through open country and then toward the high ridges of the Colorado Rockies. After takeoff, the mood inside the Cessna was light. The land fell away beneath them. Forests, ridges, and snowfields stretched out in every direction. Larry looked through the windows in wonder. Below them, wildlife moved across the open country. The engine hummed. The mountains waited ahead, white and sharp against the sky. For nearly an hour, everything felt easy. Then they climbed toward a ridge. In the Rockies, the air is rarely still. Wind crosses the peaks and breaks into invisible waves, rising in one place and plunging in another. As Justin tried to gain altitude, the Cessna stopped climbing. Then it began to sink. He looked at the vertical speed indicator and saw the aircraft dropping at nearly 800 feet per minute. The mountain was coming up at them. Justin tried to turn, but the stall warning sounded. If he pulled too hard, the wings would lose lift and the plane would fall. If he did nothing, they would hit the mountain head-on. There was no perfect decision left. There was only the least deadly one. Justin focused on slowing the aircraft, keeping it under control, and putting it into the trees in a way that might let them survive. Inside the cabin, the cheerful sightseeing trip vanished. The trees filled the windshield, then the Cessna struck. Branches smashed against the wings. Metal screamed. The airplane tore through timber, each impact stealing a little speed and breaking another piece of the machine. The crash was violent, ugly, and final. Then everything stopped. Justin was alive. For a moment, that was all he knew. Then he saw fuel. Gasoline was leaking around the wreck, and the aircraft could ignite with a single spark. The crash had not killed them, but the wreck still could. He had to get everyone out. Larry was conscious but badly hurt. His leg had taken the impact, and when he tried to move, pain overwhelmed him. Justin told him he had to leave the airplane immediately. Larry said his leg hurt. Justin knew there was no time to argue gently. He made it clear that if Larry stayed, he might burn to death. Somehow, Larry forced himself backward out of the wreck. Tommy was unconscious. He had taken a serious blow to the head and lay motionless inside the plane. Justin shouted at him, shook him, pleaded with him. Nothing. In that instant, Justin feared he had killed one of his best friends. Fuel was everywhere. The wreck might explode. Tommy weighed more than 200 pounds and could not help. Justin grabbed him and pulled. He hauled Tommy out with such force that when Tommy later came back to himself, one of his first sensations was the terrible pain of broken ribs, likely cracked during the rescue that saved his life. The three men moved away from the plane. Larry could not walk. When he put weight on his injured leg, he collapsed into the snow, screaming. Tommy was dazed, bleeding, and in agony, but he helped drag and support Larry because getting away from the fuel mattered more than anything else. At last, they reached a safer distance and looked back at the wreck. The airplane that had carried them through a beautiful morning now lay twisted in the trees. Only then did the full truth settle over them. Larry's lower leg and ankle were badly broken. Tommy had broken ribs and a head injury serious enough to have knocked him unconscious. There was no way to know whether he was bleeding inside his skull. They were high in the mountains, far from roads, far from shelter, and the cold was coming. Justin was the only one uninjured enough to act, and because he had been the pilot, he felt the weight of responsibility more heavily than anyone. He returned to the wreck to try the radio. It was a dangerous choice. The aircraft was soaked with fuel, and turning on the electrical system might create a spark. But if the radio worked, it could bring rescue. He took a breath and turned on the battery. Nothing happened. He transmitted a Mayday call, giving the aircraft identification and saying they had crashed north of Durango in an unknown canyon. Then he waited for a reply. None came. The radio gave them no comfort, no proof that anyone had heard. The mountains swallowed certainty. Justin faced a decision no one wants to make. Stay with his injured friends and hope someone came, or leave them and try to find help. The afternoon was slipping away. If they spent the night exposed in the Rockies, lightly dressed and injured, hypothermia could kill them before morning. Justin remembered flying over Durango before the crash. He believed it might be 15 miles away. In reality, it was farther, and the country between them and town was steep, snowy, and unforgiving. He had no map, no compass, and no survival gear. But he could walk, and the others could not. He told Tommy and Larry he was going for help. Before leaving, he tried to reassure Larry, promising to bring back a helicopter. Then he turned away from the wreck and began descending into the canyon alone. The first look down the drainage nearly broke his confidence. The canyon seemed endless, with no trail, only timber, rock, snow, and cold water. Justin knew he probably could not reach town before dark, but stopping was not an option. If he stopped, the cold would begin to win. Back at the crash site, Tommy watched him go and worried. Justin appeared unhurt, but adrenaline can lie. If Justin died out there, Tommy and Larry would have no way to call for help. Justin pushed on. Deep snow slowed him to a crawl. Then he found a creek. The water was shallow in places, and the creek bed gave him a path through the canyon. Walking there was faster than fighting through the banks. It was also dangerous. The water was freezing, but speed mattered more. He stepped into the creek and began moving faster, aware that one bad fall could end everything. A sprained ankle in that canyon would be a death sentence. At the wreck, Tommy knew he could not simply wait. Larry was immobile. The temperature would fall hard after sunset. Without shelter, both men might freeze. Tommy's ribs made every movement painful. His head injury affected his balance and coordination. Still, he began making trips back to the plane to gather anything useful. He stumbled through the snow, fell, got up, and fell again. Each fall drove pain through his side, but Tommy kept going. He made more than 20 trips, dragging material from the wreck and building a crude shelter. It was not much, but it gave them a barrier against wind and snow. Larry watched Tommy work and understood that his brother-in-law's stubbornness might be the only reason he lived until dawn. Miles away, Justin was soaked and exhausted. He carried a cell phone, but the canyon gave him no signal. He made a rule for himself: walk for an hour, try the phone, then walk again. After a long struggle, he saw higher ground, a clearing up the slope. Maybe from there the phone could reach the outside world. He climbed anyway. At the top, he got a signal. He made a call. It connected, but the person on the other end could not hear him. Help was close enough to hear, but not close enough to answer. He climbed higher and tried again. This time, the call worked. He told them who he was, that the plane had crashed, and that his friends were injured. He also learned that the alarm had already been raised when the aircraft failed to return to the airport. Searchers were looking. Using his phone, Justin helped guide rescuers toward him, but he knew his own rescue was not the end. Tommy and Larry were still somewhere up the canyon, hurt and hidden as darkness settled over the mountains. Back in the shelter, the cold deepened. Larry's pain and fear grew worse. He could not move his shattered leg. He began imagining what might be happening inside it. Blood loss, dead tissue, infection, amputation. Tommy tried to keep him calm. He told him to shiver because shivering meant his body was still fighting to make heat. He spoke steadily even as he worried about his own head injury. If he lost consciousness, Larry would be alone. Then something moved in the woods. Branches cracked in the darkness. Some animal was nearby. At night, injured and bleeding in a snowy forest, it became terrifying. Tommy wondered briefly whether a bear might smell his blood trail. Reason told him the danger was probably small. Most bears would be inactive in that season, but Larry began to panic. Panic burns energy, and energy was all they had left. Tommy forced himself back to the wreck one more time and searched for something that could make Larry feel less defenseless. He found a fire extinguisher. He brought it back and told Larry that if a bear came, he should aim at its face and discharge it. The extinguisher was not much, but it gave Larry a task. Almost immediately, he calmed down. Rescuers picked up Justin, and soon a helicopter entered the search. Justin went with the crew, trying to guide them from the air. Night had fallen, and the search became difficult. Trees hid the wreck. From the shelter, Tommy and Larry heard the helicopter and saw its lights sweeping the valley. They shouted. They waved. They tried to reflect the searchlight, but the timber concealed them. The aircraft passed close, then closer, and still the crew did not see them. For the men on the ground, it was agony. Rescue was overhead, almost within reach, yet blind to them. Then the helicopter moved away. Hope, once raised, can hurt more than despair when it disappears. Justin was certain they were in the right canyon, but the crew had searched without success. Doubt entered the cockpit. Justin pleaded for more time. His friends were below, injured, freezing, and waiting. The crew agreed to another pass. In the shelter, Tommy and Larry were nearing the edge. Larry said he did not think he could make it through the night. Tommy told him they would make it, but he was fighting his own collapse. He worried that if he slipped into a coma, Larry would die too. Then the helicopter returned. It flew lower and slower. The searchlights swept across the trees again. Tommy suddenly remembered the camera in his pocket. It had a flash, and only a few shots remained. He crawled out of the shelter and moved into a small opening. As the helicopter came by, he fired the flash into the night. Once, twice, again. He aimed low, then higher, then straight across. The aircraft continued moving. He had one flash left. He fired it. This time, the helicopter paused. The searchlight shifted. The crew looked again. Then they spotted the wrecked airplane. Justin had done what he promised. He had brought help back to his friends. But the mountain took one more turn. As the helicopter searched for a way to recover the injured men, it struck trees and crashed into the mountainside. It was Justin's second air crash in less than a day. Miraculously, everyone aboard survived, but Tommy and Larry did not know that. From their shelter, they only knew the helicopter had found them and then vanished. Once again, they were alone with the cold. The night dragged on. The pain became constant. Tommy began yelling into the darkness, not because he knew someone was there, but because he needed to believe someone might be. "Hello?" he called again and again. At last, someone answered. A ground rescue team had been moving through the snow, guided by the coordinates Justin had provided and by the tracks he left behind. After nearly 19 hours in the mountains, they reached Tommy and Larry. For the injured men, rescue came as voices in the dark. Tommy could finally stop fighting every wave of pain. Larry could stop wondering whether he would freeze before morning. They had survived the crash, the fuel, the injuries, the cold, and the awful uncertainty of being almost found and then lost again. Tommy and Larry were taken to the hospital in Durango. Justin, who had survived both the original crash and the helicopter crash, was reunited with them later. Against all odds, none of the three men suffered lasting injuries. It is also worth remembering how little separated rescue from failure. If Justin had fallen in the creek, if the phone had never connected, if Tommy had forgotten the camera, or if the ground team had lost the trail, the same night could have ended very differently. In stories like this, survival never arrives as one clean miracle. It arrives in fragments. A pilot who stays calm when the ridge fills the windshield. A friend who drags another man from leaking fuel. An injured survivor who refuses to let pain decide what is possible. A weak phone signal caught from a snowy slope, and one final flash from a camera when every other signal has failed. Their survival can be called luck, but luck is only part of it. Luck was in the trees that slowed the plane, in the fuel that did not ignite, in the phone signal that finally connected, in the final camera flash seen from the air. But luck did not hike through freezing water. Luck did not build a shelter with broken ribs. Luck did not keep an injured man calm through a long mountain night. What saved them was a chain of decisions made under pressure, each one small, each one human, each one pushing death a little farther away. Three friends went into the sky expecting beauty and came down into a wilderness that gave them no mercy. They survived because, minute by minute, they refused to stop trying. Thank you for watching Extreme Survival Story. If this true survival story kept you watching until the end, please like the video, share it with someone who loves real stories of courage, and subscribe to the channel for more extreme survival stories.